Okay. Okay. I think I got it. I think I got it. I think I got it. So there's something weird about because I was doing some research over the break. Let me start modeling so no one gets bored. I hope everyone who's with me is still with me. I was doing some research over the break about streaming quality stuff. I watched some videos. I did some kind of, you know, just some preliminary research trying to make sure that the quality of the stream is as good as possible. If you look at this quality now, it should be pretty high actually. Like I went to my stream settings and if you stream from the source, it says it's 2K, and it's pretty clear to me. Is everyone else getting that? Like a 2K source quality setting? Just let me know if you're at least seeing it in 2K. I think that should be what's happening. Yeah, I'm gonna get going here. Just let me know if that quality is any better. I changed one setting, and that should. I mean, it looks on my stream. It looks really good. It's streaming in 2K, so very clean. Awesome. Thank you, IT. Appreciate that, man. Okay, so yeah, so we're gonna do a little kind of cool swirly anime effect. So I'm here in Blender, Blender 2.9. Let me do some more preliminary introductions, just in case you don't know me. My name's Brian Benzen. I've been doing real-time VFX for 10 plus years now. I've worked for a bunch of major studios, EA. I worked on the last Mass Effect game. I used to work for Nintendo. I've made VFX for a really long time. I love doing this stuff. The hope of Let's Make Effects is to give back and teach people who want to do this kind of work, and do it for as cheap as possible, in the hopes that I can educate enough people to start doing this work more, because there are very few of us VFX artists in this industry, and it is my hope that I can increase that number by just doing some of this stuff that I already love doing and I would be doing in my free time anyway. So yeah, today we're gonna make some anime effects. We might get to like a cool meteor effect. We'll see how much time we have. Again, in Blender 2.9, we're using Unreal Engine 5. If anyone was interested, and yeah, we're gonna work on some cool effects. So I'm here in Blender. I just went to Add, Mesh, UV Sphere. It gave me kind of a clean sphere here. If I hit Tab, it'll take me into Edit mode. And if I come up here and I click this little kind of two squares on top of each other, that'll put me in UV mode. That way I can see the verts and the faces on the other side. So if I go to Face Select mode, and I go jump to kind of front view, which could be Y or X, it doesn't really matter, it's a full sphere, and I highlight this bottom part, yeah, for sure, IT. There are not a lot of VFX artists in this world, so it is my hope to just keep educating folks so that we increase our numbers. It's the whole reason for the community building and the Let's Make Effects Discord, which, if you're not part of the Discord and you're watching this, you should be part of the Discord. I would ask IT to drop that in the chat. If you can, just drop an invite link. That'd be super cool. I think other people would really benefit from that. But yeah, join us on Discord. I got a Patreon as well that you can be a part of. I'll throw some links in the chat here in a second. But Let's Make Effects is a community of VFX artists who are just learning and growing from each other, that I started building a couple years ago, and you know, every new member means another person I can teach and help give some information to, and so I would love for you to join if you're here and you're watching. So I just went into I added a second window here in Blender. The way you do that is you go up to the upper right corner of any window, and you can drag out. If you left click and drag, you can create a new window. And if you want to get rid of one, you go up to that left corner and it turns into that little kind of cross mark. And if you drag back the other direction, it'll show this little arrow here. And that arrow just means it's gonna take the screen that is not dim and stamp over the screen that is dim, or the viewport that is dim. So right now, so we're back down to one viewport on this side because I drug to the right and got rid of that window. So I did the same thing here. I opened up a new UV window and I went up here and I went to the UV editor, and that shows me the UVs for this model. So the UVs are only covering half of the UV space, right? This UV space is 0 to 1, and in visual effects, when you want to make an effect that essentially kind of scrolls or spins a texture across the surface of the model, is important to utilize as much UV space as you can. There are reasons why you wouldn't do that, but normally you're trying to kind of stretch the model to be as large as you can. And thank you, IT, for adding that to the chat there. Anyone who's not part of our Discord, join. It's free. We drop a bunch of knowledge there. IT is a moderator on the Discord, and we just put up our first challenge of the year, which is to make a visual effect with no textures, which would be a really fun challenge to do. And if anyone's interested, that's what we're working on, and there's a prize as well. So get involved if you're interested in visual effects. So what we're gonna do is scale the UVs vertically, right? Right now we only occupy half the space, right? So if we multiply that times 2, it should be the full space. So if I just select all of the UVs here, and I hit scale, hit S for scale, and then I hit Y because I want to do it in the Y direction, and then I hit 2, it doubles the size in the vertical direction, right? And then I want to offset this. So right now, because we were at kind of half the space, I know mathematically that if I move these UVs down a quarter of the space, then it'll be all within the 0 to 1 space. So if I hit G to move, and I hit Y to only move in the Y direction, and I type minus 0.25, boom, it drops us into the 0 to 1 space, and the UVs are perfect. I hope that wasn't too complicated. Some quick math. I essentially multiplied, since these spheres UVs occupied the full 0 to 1 space, and we cut the sphere in half, we only had half the UVs. So we doubled the size of the UVs in the vertical direction, and then we moved them down a quarter, and that set us up into a 0 to 1 space. So now we have a UV sphere that's flat 0 to 1, and if I hit tab, we're back into Blender, and if I turn off UV mode, you can see we have half a sphere. Now, you're looking at the sphere and you're thinking, what are all these little kind of facets, right? It looks a little bit kind of hard-edged. The way to kind of get rid of that and let Blender and Unreal Engine, when we go to export this, know that you want this sphere to look smooth, is you come up here to Object and you select Shade Smooth. So I just selected that, and boom, now our sphere looks smooth, right? So perfect. That's a great start to this effect. What we're gonna do is save this file, save it as, and you can't see this, but I'm on another screen here, and I'm just going over to my F drive, to my Unreal projects, and I'm going to the Twitch stream projects, and in here I often will number this with the date of today. I just called this Meteor because I thought maybe we might get into a Meteor later, but for now, in the content folder, if I was to right click and create a new folder and call it models, now that folder exists, and inside models we're just going to save this as half sphere, and I'm going to put a G underscore at the beginning for geometry, half sphere, just to give this some kind of convention. So that file we just saved is not a file that we can actually see and use in the Unreal editor. So instead, we're going to export it as an FBX. This is just the model file type that Unreal Engine actually understands. So we're in the same folder we just were in, Unreal Meteor Content Models, and we're just going to save this as G half sphere. And we're going to check this checkbox up here that says selected object, because all we really want is our sphere, and then hit export. And so now, over in Unreal Engine, it'll see, oh, there's a change to the source content. Would you like to import that as our new model? I hit import, and then hit import again, and that imports our new model. Sometimes you're going to see an error message here, no smoothing groups. I don't normally worry about that at all. It's not a big deal. So over here in our models folder, which we just created while we were in Blender, you're going to see our half sphere. Now check that out, right? Oh, you can't see that. It's on another window. Here you go. Check that out. That's our half sphere. Spat it out of Blender. Now it's in Unreal Engine, and that's really cool. So next we're going to need a texture. And there's plenty of ways to generate textures. I love to generate noise textures in Blender. That's like my kind of catch-all tool for anything that I'm trying to do that's going to need some assets normally. But also sometimes it's nice to hand paint them. And since this is anime, let's do a little hand painting. I'm going to grab my tablet here, and we're just going to do a little painting. So here we go. So we're going to open up Photoshop. Get my little self situated here. I'm going to open up Photoshop. I really should have made the window that I'm streaming on my main window. You know, folks, being new to streaming has been awesome, and and I learn something new every day. Let's start a new file. Photoshop's just thinking real hard about that starting a new file thing. I just didn't, or maybe it's not. Wait. It's behind the window. That's weird. Yeah, we'll do 1024 by 1024. Strange, because on stream it's like in front of the window. Huh. Anyway. So we're just opening up a new Photoshop file. We're just going to do a little bit of painting. It's not going to be really, kind of arduous, difficult painting. It's just going to be kind of simple noise, directional noise. My Photoshop file seems to be thinking really hard about opening up this window. Are you going to crash or something? Oh, there it is. That was really strange. That took a super long time for no reason. I'm not going to wow you with this artistic quality here. Oh, interesting. I realized that my tablet's not plugged in. I was like, why can't I draw? I was like holding the pen and scrambling around and nothing. Give me 1 sec. I just plugged that in. Yep. First stream, you can tell. It's I'm trying to get all my ducks in a row here. So here we go. Let's see. Can I draw? Interesting. Okay, well, let's do it the old-fashioned way. We'll use a mouse. Sometimes people, that's all they got, so we'll use a mouse. It's not going to be pretty, but it'll work. We'll work it out. In the meantime, I'm going to open up my Wacom to make sure that I got the screen mapping. Should be. Oh, interesting. Let's go to monitor 1. Sorry. Do you think there's another monitor in between the I meant for Photoshop. Monitor 1, okay. And then if I move this around, can I see my pen? Nope. Okay. Yep, we're gonna do it with the mouse. Sometimes you just gotta get in there, man. We're gonna save this as let's go to my what is it? F drive, Unreal Projects. I'm like a frequent saver. I think once you do this job for long enough, you just imagine you're going to lose every piece of work all the time, and so you just kind of constantly save in an effort to not lose anything. Just going to create a new folder here, and I'm going to call it Textures. And in Textures, I'm going to save this new thing as diagonal T underscore diagonal noise. Oops. Noise. There you go. And we're just going to save it. And let me make sure I'm not missing any comments or anything. Awesome. Okay. And yeah, we're just gonna paint over here. Control D to get rid of that. We're gonna turn this layer black. Let me zoom in a little bit so it's a little easier to see. Is that? Oh, let me do it a little so I know that there's an edge. Okay, cool. Let's get rid of the like red. I purposely made my grid lines red because sometimes when I'm drawing and they're gray, it's like hard to see where they are, so I just changed the color. We may or may not restart Photoshop just to see if I can get my pen working after we get going on this. So yeah, so I'm going to take the brush and I'm going to come up here to brush settings. And I'm going to just use a soft brush and I'm going to make it pretty big. And I'm going to, yeah, maybe we'll go down to like 50% opacity, and we're just going to paint lines. Oh, not in black though. Black isn't going to help us. Let's find my history here. History, drop it over here. Yeah, and let's just go back one layer. Okay, so we are going to paint in white so that this turns out to be a little gray, right? Yeah, so we're just going to do this. We're going to paint kind of horizontal lines. We're not going to worry too much about kind of what they look like yet. And we're going to decrease the opacity once and then kind of paint in some other lines here. And then we are going to go into Unreal Engine after we make this texture tiling, and we're going to show you why we did this in the first place. So, so the way to make this texture tile is to we'll duplicate the background layer and we'll merge these two layers together. That way our noise is just on one solid layer. I started using Procreate a couple weeks ago for hand-drawn VFX textures. It's really nice. You know, I keep hearing about Procreate. Tiling textures sadly sucks. Oh, okay, yeah. So you go back to Photoshop probably for most parts. Yeah, that's interesting. I keep hearing about Procreate. I really actually want to try that out. Seems like a lot of 2D artists are moving that way, so I might jump in there. The way you do that kind of make this texture tiling here in Photoshop is you come up here to other offset, and you can offset the texture. Now you can see here. It's so interesting. I feel like it offset me. Right? Oh, where's the Photoshop window then? For some reason, I'm like, I don't have my, the offset menu isn't around. What happened here? Weird. Okay. So I'm in history, and it doesn't have offset as a history item. It won't let me select anything. That's interesting. Huh. Okay, well. I think my Photoshop's messing up, y'all. Okay, well, how about this? Task Manager. End task? Might as well at this point. I can't, it wouldn't let me select anything. We'll jump back in. Open. We're going back to the project. You can't see this is on another screen, but I'm just going back to the project. Twitch recordings, meteor, content, textures, diagonal noise. Come on, it's opening. Let's get rid of the task manager. That's not cool to look at. I'll throw this back over this side, and I really am curious where this pen thinks it is right now. Whole lot of nothing from the pen, huh? Okay, well, maybe I should have tested that before the stream. Okay, new layer. Fill the background layer with black. Control D. I get the feeling. Huh. Oh, the pen's there. Awesome. Okay, the pen's there. Weird. Okay, well, here we are, folks. Let's see if we get some right? Oh, interesting. The mapping is strange. Okay, but at least I can paint. So let's go to the next layer. I'll go look at the mapping in a second, but let's try to paint something and make sure we get what we need here. Turn the opacity down. Okay, and then oh, interesting. Get bigger. Oh, there you go. Now we're on it, everyone. We're back. We're back. It's 2022. We're back. We're starting this one off with a bang. It's good. Tiling speed lines. I have one right on hand. Oh no. They're just sort of I'm just sort of painting like a kind of like diagonal. They're not necessarily speed lines. They're more kind of I don't want any smoothing. Get out of here with that. It's just more kind of streaks. And you'll see why. And there's no reason to rush either. We're just, it's just hang out. We're just hanging out. We don't need to have a solution to this problem. We just need to paint and enjoy ourselves here. Here we go. So, there we go. Yeah. So we're just, and we can, interesting. It's kind of got this like weird smearing situation going on, which I kind of like. I kind of like and kind of hate. Soft brush. We'll make it bigger. Yeah. Now we're photoshopping, y'all. Don't worry about it. There you go. Yeah. We're good, everyone. It's fine. We don't need to, we don't need to have solved anything right off the bat here. We just paint in some stuff. We're gonna blur this filter. Oh, let me turn off the now we're back in business, everyone. Show grid. We're gonna just filter other blur or filter blur Gaussian blur. Yeah, there you go. We'll just blur this stuff up a little bit, and we'll come back with our own junk here. Yep. Shrink that down. We'll make this brush a little bit stronger. I just like to paint it in layers if I'm gonna do it. It'll be a spinny whirly thing. Yeah. Tablet's back in business. Don't worry about the tablet. I appreciate the help though, IT. That's, it's nice of you, for sure. Just shape dynamics is all I really want. Everything else will come together. Everything else will come together, y'all. Just soften that shit, and we'll blur it and come back and add some layers and blur it. It doesn't have to be perfect. That's part of the teaching of this stuff too, is like it doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to be something. So I'm gonna blur this again. If you hear any kind of like chewing noises, my dog, his hands itch. I think California is not agreeing with his skin, so I'm working on trying to get him to get some allergy meds. So I just hit offset, right? And I recognize the window to offset is somewhere. It's just not giving me an offset window, which I find infuriating, actually. Where is it? Is there some, like... Huh. So I hit offset, and nothing's happening. Filter, other, offset. Yeah, and then the rest of it's left. Man, Photoshop's messing up, y'all. Okay, we're not gonna use Photoshop then. IT, if you have that texture, just drop it to me. I'm astounded. I don't know what's happening in Photoshop here, but I can't once I hit offset, it like doesn't bring up the window to give me the offset, and then I can't do anything else in Photoshop. So I'm gonna grab old textures from another project, and we'll just keep going. We'll come back. I'll figure out what the hell's going on with Photoshop in a minute. I don't want to hold this up. I'm going over here, and I'll just go into one of my other projects, and I'll just grab some textures. It's not a big deal. My F drive, Unreal projects, and we'll just go to like effects library, which is like a thing I started years ago actually that has like a bunch of like a crap ton of textures. We're just gonna dump a bunch of them in, and we're gonna go have fun in Unreal. Let's just stop worrying about it. Grab all this, and we'll just import them all. Copy. We'll work out what's going on with Photoshop later. Let's go over to Unreal Engine, content drawer in the textures folder, and we're gonna right click and show me where this texture is in, or this folder is in, that's fine. We'll just go to G drive, nope, it should be F drive. F drive, Unreal projects, Twitch, Meteor, content, textures, paste. Just give me all the textures. Yeah, I'm not gonna worry about it. Something's going on with Photoshop. I'll figure it out in a minute. I'd rather it's not like take forever to do that. Oh, send it to me on Discord. Awesome. Pop open Discord here for a minute. We have a bunch of textures to play with, which is what we're about to do. I'm gonna right click in this window, and I'm gonna create a folder called materials, and I'm gonna make sure materials is in content, and in the materials folder, I'm gonna right click material, create a new material. I'm gonna call it M underscore Spinning Orb. I'll import all of that stuff. That's fine with me. You do it. You do it, Unreal. So we're gonna open up material Spinning Orb, and in here we're just gonna create. Let me see this Discord situation here. Let's see what we got. Oh yeah. See, that's that's. I wanted kind of like the full. I'll find something in the library of crap I just imported to use, but I appreciate it. I do. Let's come on. Oh, it's just finishing importing. So in this window, preparing textures. Okay, well, right click, hold T and left click, I'm sorry, and you get a texture sample. And I think all the textures just came in, which is great. So now we have a bunch of textures to play with. I'll figure out what the hell happened to Photoshop later. One of those textures is going to be something that feels like some noise that's moving in the direction I want. And if it isn't, I'll use math to make it do that way. Yeah, one of the many, I have a crap ton of these just folders full of stuff like this. let's just use one of these, whatever. It'll be swirly noise, distortion smoke. Hopefully that tiles. I imagine it will. So if you hit this little arrow, if you select the texture in the content drawer, and then you go back to the material editor and you see this little arrow, it'll say use the texture that's currently selected. So right now we're using distortion smoke, and that's what got thrown into this little texture sample. So if you drag off of the red channel, which is just a singular channel of color, black and white data, you're going to see your texture shown up on the model, which is great. If we want to see the model here in the preview, the way to do that is to go find the model in the content folder. So over here in content drawer, models, if you select this model and you go back to your material and you click this little kind of brick looking thing over here in UE5, it used to be a teapot in UE4. If you click it, you'll see the model that we exported from Blender sitting here. So that's kind of cool, huh? So where I wanted to start was just talking a little bit about UV panning. So if you right click and you search for panner, if you plug this panner into the UV of this texture sample, and we give this a speed in the Y direction, you'll see like a speed of 0.2. You'll see the texture on the model we created in Blender starts to scroll upward. See that? And because this texture is seamless, which we were going to do in Photoshop, there aren't any edges, right? So now it just seems like seamless kind of floating upward. This would be cooler if this was moving faster or had some color to it. So let's add a color. How about that? We'll hold M and left click, and that brings up a multiply. The way to add some color to your material is to, well, there's several ways, but one simple way is to hold down the 3 button on your keyboard and left click. And if you go in here and you choose a color, in the details panel, if you click on the little constant and you choose a color, like say blue, and you hit OK, then this 3-channel color should turn to blue. And then if you multiply your noise by that color and you plug that into emissive color, now our noise should be blue, which is cool, right? That's pretty awesome. So one of the things that that this is missing is kind of any kind of depth, right? Right now it feels like this is kind of just noise scrolling vertically, and that's not super interesting. Let's actually turn this material so to use transparency, so we can see through to the other side. Because right now we're just looking where this texture kind of hits the bottom of its color, it's just black. Instead, let's make it see-through. So instead of opaque here in the blend mode, and the way you get to this kind of the base node's settings is to just click on the base node or click on nothing, and it'll bring up this kind of material settings over here in the detail panel. And if you click where it says opaque and you change this to translucent, then nothing new is going to happen yet. We're going to refactor what it is we made to work with the translucency now. So we're going to plug our noise into the opacity slot. That way it gives us some sense of what's visible and what's not. Wherever this texture is white, that means we're going to see color, and where it's black, we will see nothing. And then I'm kind of wondering why we don't see anything in the preview panel right now, but let's, okay. Oh, there it is. Just took a long time. Okay. So yeah, so it's kind of faint and hard to see, but you can see there's some noise there. Instead of trying to struggle to see it, we'll change the way this looks. We'll remove the background, and that helps a little bit. And then instead of leaving the opacity where it is, we'll multiply it. We'll use a power node to change the kind of the contrast of where the black and the whites are. So a power node is kind of like a contrast node. If I hold 1 and left click and drop a constant, and I give this power a power of say 0.5, that means give me more kind of whites and grays and less black. And if I go the other direction with that power, that means kind of give me more grays and blacks and less white. So I'm just I'm changing the amount of contrast, the amount of visible kind of middling tones, so that I can see more of my texture here. And if I wanted to make that kind of easier to see even more, I could multiply this value by say like 5 or 10 or something to just be like, make my brightest brights brighter, or make my kind of middling tones a little bit brighter, right? So now we can see it pretty well. So what I wanted to do was not just pan this vertically, but kind of pan it horizontally. So we can add a number to the x value, say like 0.3, right? So now it'll be spinning to the right a little bit more than it is kind of moving vertically when this processes. One of the things that's really interesting about working in material shaders, which is kind of my favorite part about visual effects, you can see it's kind of spinning and rising vertically until it hits that kind of top peak there. One of the cool things is that when you really understand what you're doing in these windows, you can give yourself a bunch of options that you can then go kind of change and make into like a little kind of toy for yourself to make a bunch of cool effects. So instead of just changing this contrast value or this multiply value here in this window, we should parameterize these values, and that way it gives us the ability to make some of these changes in another window where those changes will apply faster, and we'll be able to make a bunch of kind of iterations of some things. So instead of this 0.5, we're going to right click it and say convert to parameter, and this will be, we're going to call this power. Sometimes people call it POW for short. Let's stick with POW, and that way, if you ever see that out there in the world, you'll understand what it means. It's normally short for power. What I did here was I converted a constant we already had in the window to a parameter. Another way to drop a parameter in here is to hold S and left click, and that just creates a parameter right away. And this parameter is going to be called hardness. And so a default value of 1, or maybe opacity is probably better. Opacity is probably a better word for this. Oops. I have 3 dogs, and one of them is having a dream, and he's yipping. So if you hear any yipping in the background, that's what it is. It's my doggos. They're dreaming. So opacity of 1. It used to be 5. So let's multiply this. I'm trying to think about. Let's just make it 5. Oop, 54. 5. And then we can do the same for speed. If we come over here and we right click and we look for the word append in this kind of node search, we want append vector. So with a panner, it gives us 2 speed options, right? X and Y, and that's for vertical and horizontal movement on the UV space. Those 2 values, when put together, those 2 singular float values, when kind of crammed together into a single data point, it's called a vector 2. And to create a new vector 2, you can use an append and append 2 values together to create a vector 2. Speed, if I wanted to input a value here that we could then create as a parameter that we could change later, needs to be a vector 2. So I'm using an append to plug into speed, so I can have an x and a y, a and a b, an x and a y value to give this speed in the horizontal and vertical direction. So if I hold S and I left click, I can call this speed x. And then if I copy paste this, I can call the second one speed y. And speed x and speed y by default are going to be 0. And we can change those values in the material instance, which I was just talking about as a method to give us some flexibility. The one other thing I'll parameterize here is color. So we can right click this color value and say convert to parameter, and we can call this color. Maybe more specifically emissive color. So now that we have some things to play with, let's save, and let's go create a material instance, and then we'll just mess around with some of these values and create something fun. Then we'll come back and we'll add some extra functionality when we know that we're happy with where we landed. So just to drop this in the window, I'm going to drag and drop this this half sphere into the window here, and if I hit F, it'll focus in on it, which is really cool. And one of the things I like to do, because I think kind of sometimes it can get distracting, is I like to hide or delete the background atmosphere, and the sky sphere, just to kind of have myself working in kind of a black space. It's not realistic or indicative of what this effect might look like in a game window or in a game space, but it's nice to kind of develop this way first. So I'm gonna expand the floor plane to be like 10 by 10 maybe, just to give us some more space and not be staring at just a small kind of window there. And that way we're just staring at this thing kind of in isolation. One of the things I like to do to help kind of keep some consistency with where I'm developing is to create a material for the floor. So if I right click and I go to materials and I name this m_floor, we can quickly come over here to that material. If you double click it and you come in here and you hold 3 and click, you can create a color. You can right click, convert it to parameter, and call this color, and this will be the floor's color. I'm gonna leave it as black by default, and I'll just tell you, for those who maybe aren't familiar with Pbr values, or maybe you are, this isn't gonna seem foreign to you. I don't want any kind of shininess to the floor, so I'm gonna put 0 in my specular and 1 in my roughness, meaning don't have any kind of sheen or reflectivity. Just give me kind of a flat colored floor that accepts lighting. And so I'm gonna just set that as black. Now I might in the window set it as gray, but for right now on this floor plane, I'm just gonna select floor and just drop that in. So now we're just kind of working in like a black space. There's nothing here. If I wanted to add some shadows, I would change the color of the floor, but for right now, I think that's all right. So on our sphere, I'm gonna add, actually, I'm gonna come in and grab m_spinning orb, and I'm gonna right click and create a material instance. Now if I double click this material instance, you can see that it's allowing me to use to play with the values of the material that we expose to ourselves here in this window, just to kind of see what it feels like. So we can do it here, or we can do it in the other window, but essentially what we want to do is just sort of start to play with these values and see how it makes us feel. So let's give this some vertical speed. So right now this window isn't in real time, which means we're not going to see the changes unless we start moving the window around, and that's just kind of silly and not helpful to us. So if you come up here to the little kind of 3 horizontal lines, it's like a settings, and you hit real time, then it'll start to move on its own without you moving the camera around. So now we got our texture kind of scrolling vertically. If we want to add some more of that horizontal movement, we might do 1 in the horizontal, and now we got some spinning stuff going, which is cool, right? That's pretty fun. It's already starting to look kind of like a cool ability. It isn't super anime at the moment, but instead of drawing out the texture in Photoshop, because Photoshop failed us horribly, we're gonna do some math to get there. Oh, awesome! Hey, thanks, Laura. I appreciate that. I ran for 2 years. Yeah, the majority of my time was in uni, and didn't realize how. Yeah. Well, I'm glad you're here to absorb some of that. Yeah, like I said, I do this every Saturday. and I just sit down and I talk. I've been doing this for 10 years myself, 10 years actually, and I've worked in a number of places, Telltale, Volition on Saints Row, and yeah, all over the place. And so I just really love this work, and I love being able to tell other people how it works and get folks excited about visual effects. My hope is to build an army of effects artists for the future, so that our industry is just full of us, because we're very rare, us VFX artists. So one of the things I haven't done, and it makes me really nervous, is I have not saved this level yet. So I'm gonna just save current, and I'm gonna create in the content folder a map folder, maps. And in the maps folder, I'm just gonna create a demo map, and that will be where we're currently working. So yeah, so now we just got some kind of scrolling, yeah, just some scrolling stuff here going on, which is great. Oh, is the stream choppy? Oh, interesting. Maybe the save is what's. I'm just now taking a look at the stream to see. Maybe it was just choppy because because I was saving. Okay, I just want to make sure it wasn't choppy this whole time. Laura, I'm glad you're here. Thanks for coming. It seems like you're a first timer here, and so please come back. Please join our Discord, and support me on Patreon if you'd like. Subscribe to this channel if you think that the content's great. I actually just realized today, while I continue to work on this stuff, that I can leave old Twitch videos on Twitch, so that if people are interested and missed the video, that they can watch it later. I thought they only were there for a finite amount of time, but I can re-upload them, which is cool. So I'm gonna work on doing that today. If anyone was interested in seeing previous Twitch streams, we also have a YouTube channel, Let's Make Effects, youtube.com/Let's Make Effects. So got our floor plane, and that's good, and we don't really need to do any other stuff there. We are gonna go back into the material and talk a little bit about material scale, or texture scale, UV scale. So right now the texture is as large as it was when I made it in Photoshop years ago, and I know our Photoshop woes were problematic today, and so it's no big deal though, right? Like all we have to do is just change the scale of this if we really want to look different later. So the way you can change the scale of a texture that you've already imported into the engine is to come over here to kind of before the panner starts, and if you right click and look for and type COO and look for texture coordinate, and you hit enter, it drops a texture coordinate. So texture coordinates, just right off top here, is just a flat 0 to 1 UV, right? So the kind of generic scale of this texture coordinate is a scale of 1 in the X and a 1 in the Y. And you can see that because U's tiling and V's tiling are both a value of 1. If I wanted to change those values, I could just change these numbers here. I could add 2 and 2, and that would scale. If I plug this into coordinate for the panner, that would make the texture smaller on the surface of the model, right? So more repetitions of the texture. The larger the UV scale, the more repetitions of the texture across the surface. And then the smaller is the opposite, right? So if this was a 0.5 scale and a 0.5 scale, yeah, it'll load up here in a second. So now the detail, even though this causes a seam, the detail you can see is much larger, right? So the larger the tiling number, the smaller the detail. The smaller the tiling number, the larger the detail. And just like with the speed and with power and with opacity and with color, if I decided I wanted to change the scale in the material instance, right, then I could parameterize the scale. The way I would do that is to use a multiply. So if I hold M and I left click, I can drop a multiply. And if I plug my texture coordinates, my UV scale, into a multiply, and then I give myself a value, say hold S and left click to create a parameter, and I call this UV scale, or texture tiling, or what, they're all the same name, then you can, if you set this to a default value of 1, then you can we can change the scale of the UVs in the material instance, right? So now changing this value here in UV scale, if I reset my texture coordinates back to a value of 1, changing this value in UV scale is the same as changing the tiling, the amount of UV tiling, U and V tiling in the texture coordinate specifically. But now I can do this, if I save, I can do this in the material instance, which is what we want, right? We want the ability to be able to change values on the fly. I guess one question might be, if you're not interested or not too familiar with graphics programming, shaders, and materials, you would say, why do we need material instances? What is the material instance for? Material instances are for trying to give ourselves the ability to create a singular material shader. That's what this is. That's where we are right now, is a material, or shader sometimes is called in programs. They're interchangeable names. Create one of those and then use several kind of different values for each of these parameters to create different instances or use cases for all of the functionality we've created here, right? It essentially allows us to create this thing one time and then use it multiple times to solve many different kinds of material surfaces, right? So if I gave myself the ability to change the speed, the scale, the color, the contrast, all of those things, and I had multiple use cases where I wanted to have this be red instead of blue and have the detail be larger instead of smaller, I can create this one shader and have multiple instances. And then if I decide I want to add functionality, like say I want this texture to be able to rotate, when I change it here in this one material, this one shader, every instance that's using this shader will then have the functionality to also rotate, right? So it's kind of a work smarter, not harder workflow to create lots of functionality in your shader and then utilize that functionality per material instance. That's the point of material instances. So just as a blanket statement, they're very useful. They're cheaper than creating a new shader for every small change you want to make. Instead, you just give your shader multiple pieces of functionality and then utilize those functions as needed in all of your instances. So what we did here was we gave ourselves the ability to change the scale. So if I just ramp this up to 2, now you can see there's more repetitions of the texture vertically, right? But you also see that the speed seems slower. And the reason for that is because the number of revolutions of the texture has now changed because the scale is smaller. It's moving up the appearance of the texture feels slower because it's moving up the model slower because there's more repetitions, right? So to compensate for that, you can increase the vertical speed, right? So now it's about as fast as it used to be given the new scale. So yeah, so if we wanted to give this more layers and kind of create an effect that feels kind of whole and full, I would maybe make this material two-sided. If I was making kind of a spinny energy field type thing, I would make this two-sided. So the way you do that is a simple checkbox in Unreal. If you come over here to two-sided and you check this checkbox, now our material will be visible on the front side and on the back side. So if you see here, you're seeing the material on the other side of the model. Now, one of the things that's really tough or interesting about working in Unreal Engine with transparency is that it doesn't handle transparent objects and which one it should render in front or behind very well. So sometimes what you'll see when you make something translucent is this kind of weird kind of cracking where you're kind of seeing the front, kind of seeing the back. It's an interesting dilemma. I'll show you some stuff that you can do to not have that problem, but let's save and go take a look at what's going on in Engine. So now we're seeing both the front and the back side of this material, which is great. One of the things that I think you can do to solve this problem is you can change your shader type. Because opacity and which which layer of this effect should be visible is difficult. You can make the material masked. You can make the material additive. There's kind of a bunch of ways to kind of solve this problem, but they're gonna lie in your blend mode, or you can do some old-fashioned tricks like creating another mesh, flipping it inward, and giving it a sort layer or render sorting that's less, or I guess, yeah, more, making it sort after the outer edge, or before the outer edge, would solve that problem. But for now, you can just make this additive if you wanted to, which doesn't change any of the work that we've done, and it just sort of it adds the amount of opacity on top of itself, so that when these layers get put on top of each other, it just looks brighter as opposed to looking kind of broken and cracked, right? So that's one solution, right? Another would be to use masked, and there's some drawbacks to that, but I'll just show you what that looks like. So a masked blend mode means you're either visible or not visible. It's more of a 0 to 1 as opposed to using translucency, which takes in several different values of visibility and tries to sort them between each other. It's essentially saying you're on or off. Off means, or black means off, not visible. White means on, visible. So if I was to plug our current noise into opacity masked as opposed to opacity, you'll see what it is I'm talking about here. Where this texture is black now, there's this hard kind of like not visible edge. You understand what I'm saying? So if I save this, I'll just show you what I mean over in the material instance. If I save this, come on, and I go back to the instance, you can see all the places where this hits black, this noise hits black. Now we have a hole in the mesh, right? And I can, if I want to be make sure it's really visible, I can change the opacity, start ramping down this value, right? Making the noise a little bit less hard, and that's removing more and more of the noise. You see what I'm saying? And that's kind of cool, right? Because it creates this kind of cartoonish, stylized look. And I think that that's kind of nice. It's you know, what are we going for here today? Nothing really. I don't have any plans. It's just to make something that looks cool and explain some concepts and hope that people enjoy themselves. So there's no real plan to these streams, but to have fun and learn something. So I hope that's what's going on for everyone. If I wanted to, I could get really really interesting, and I could start to play with some differing layers of this thing. I could make multiple layers to it. I could use it like a bump offset to have 2 layers going. There's a bunch of ways to handle this. What I'm gonna do, just so you can get a kind of a glimpse of a bunch of different kinds of things, is I'm gonna go back to a translucent blend mode, and I'm not gonna let it be two-sided, right? So now we're not gonna have that weird cracking issue. But what I am gonna do is I'm gonna fake or create a second layer of noise, and I'm going to use a different noise texture. So if I copy paste this work and I go back to my content browser, that's over here. That looks pretty cool, huh? It's not bad. If you hit G, you can hide all of the widgets and just kind of look at the effect there by itself. I think it's kind of interesting not seeing the floor, but then we don't get any shadowing. So maybe we'll change the color of the floor later. But for right now, let's add a second layer of noise and you know, just take a look at some stuff we can do here to make another cool layer. So I'm not really sure. Again, if you joined us kind of late here, there are there are multiple textures in this project because I just kind of dumped a bunch of stuff from another project I had into this project because my Photoshop was acting weird, and I'd just rather not try to, troubleshoot that while you guys are here. So I'm not really sure what's in this project. I'm hoping that it's just stuff from an old project I hadn't opened up in years. So we're going to use this kind of random noise texture that looks kind of like, let's use the other direction. Sorry. I want this one instead. I think it's just the flipped version, and we could have flipped this with a 1- or something, but let's just use it as is. So if I wanted to add a second layer of noise here, I could just hold A and left click and take the red channel from noise 1 and the red channel from noise 2 and add them together. And then just plug that back into our power. And now we should have two layers of noise. Should be in real time. Oh, none of them, the default values for scrolling are zeros. Let's give speed 1 a default value of 1. That way we get some kind of movement. And this just should be in real time, right? So now we have 2 layers of noise here. And it's not very apparent that we have 2 layers of noise. What I'm going to do is, instead of using singular power values, I'm going to do 2 sets of power and multiply values. So allow myself to change the contrast and the opacity of both noise layers before I add them together. So layer 1, layer 2, and I'm going to call this pow 1, opacity 1, and we could be better about this if we really wanted to, but we're just experimenting and having a good time. Oh, did it just crash? Holy crap. Okay, it just crashed. That's fine. All I did was change a singular value and it crashed. It's opening back up. I can't remember the last time we saved, so I don't know where it's going to be. Okay. As a man who's constantly says he likes to save, I recognize that I have done myself a disservice by not saving. Open. Okay, well, we're pretty good. I can't remember the last time I saved, but I do it so often that I'm never really super concerned that I'll lose everything. There's a good chance I'm pretty close when I open it back up because my brain just kind of constantly does this saving stuff just to make sure. Okay, yeah, it's not a big deal. It's always better the second time is what I like to tell myself. Instead of creating a whole new chain of speed values, I'm just going to use the same panner speed for both. And honestly, because we crashed, I got the chance to think about that. I am going to come back here though and change the power and the opacity values to say 2. And that's why you save, kids. Seriously. Always save. Because, it's so sad when you lose everything. We're going to make this unlit, meaning don't care about the lighting. And then I'm going to add these 2 together. Add unlit, translucent. Add them together. And I think it's still 2-sided, which I don't care for at the moment. And I am going to parameterize the textures themselves, which we haven't talked about. So if I didn't want to use the same texture and add both of these together, I can make 2 different kinds of textures that I can then change in the instances as well by converting this to a parameter, right? So I can call this texture 1. And this next one can be texture 2. Convert to parameter, texture 2. We could even be more specific and call this noise 1, noise 2, but texture 1, texture 2. So now we get the ability to change these textures in our material instance as well. The speeds will be the same. We can make them different if we want to. In fact, here's a really fun trick I like to do all the time. what I'll do is, instead of redoing or adding a second layer of math that I don't care to work through, sometimes I just take the speed value I'm already getting from one set of noise, and I drag off this append, and I just do divide by 2. So now the speed of texture 2 is going to be half the speed of texture 1, and every time I change the speed of texture 1, it'll update the speed of texture 2. Really simple point that I'm sure people are like, duh, but it's a real time saver and gives your material a little extra, like kind of different feel to it. So if we save this, and we go back to our orb in the world, we'll just see what that looks like. So back here, we got 2 layers of noise, and it's kind of hard to see, but it does have a second layer of depth to it. Let me zoom in a little bit. What I'll do is, instead of just having this value be a divide by 2, I'm going to parameterize it. So if I hold S and I left click, I'm going to say texture 2, I'm going to call it speed. Keep everything together. Speed, texture 2, divisor. And I'm going to leave it at that default 2 value. Let's do it a different way. Speed texture 2 scalar. And then instead of a divide, we're going to use a multiply. So right click, look for multiply, and then select it. So we're going to multiply the speed value by a 0.5, which is the same as dividing by 2, right? And then plug that into speed. The reason I did that is because sometimes thinking about divisions is a little harder for me, but I can think about what half of a speed is or what a quarter of speed is, as opposed to like how many times I need to divide a thing. Division seems to be less easy for my brain for some reason. So multiplication, very easy to me. So now, if I save that and I go back to the editor, if I go and open my material instance, which is the one that's on this this object here, if I make this real time, and if you look, you can kind of tell there are 2 layers, but just to make sure you can see there are 2 layers, I'm going to go to my that speed scalar, that's texture 2 speed scalar, and I'm going to make it 0.1, right? So now you can definitely tell there are 2 layers, right? And so that's kind of cool. It gives us some depth, right? Shaders don't have to just be one surface. They can be multiple surfaces moving at different speeds and offsetting each other and adding to each other and multiplying against each other. There are a lot of really cool ways to utilize this math to do this kind of layered work. In fact, for what it's worth, you can flip the speeds so that one goes opposite or one goes, like I could come in here and I could, instead of having them both go the same way, I can make this scalar value multiply it times -1 before I plug it back into speed, right? So take the speed of texture 1, multiply it by some scalar, flip it so that it's negative, and that now it'll go down and to the right as opposed to up and to the left, right? So now they're scrolling against each other. Sorry, my nose has been so weird lately. I think California isn't agreeing with me either. It's in terms of the weather. So 0.2, right? So now you can definitely see one scrolling down and one scrolling up, and that's just kind of like a fun, cool way to handle sometimes this kind of work. We can even just as one more option, you can take the append that you're getting from here, from speed 1. You can use your own append here, right? And you can say, I don't care about X. I don't want to rotate it in the horizontal direction. So if I hold 1 and I left click, I get a singular float value, and I just set that to be 0, meaning I'm not going to move in the X. And then I can take the Y, the kind of vertical speed, and I can divide or scale that, right? Only that. Plug that into this append. So now I've gone and made a speed value, a vector 2 speed value, and then plug that into speed, right? So now I'm not moving in X, even though speed 1 is moving, or texture 1 is moving in X, but I am moving in the same value of Y scaled to some value, right? So, so that might be kind of cool to look at. Let's save that. So now one's moving vertically and one's moving horizontally. You can definitely see that there's 2 layers of noise here, which is fun. So to me, I want to change texture 2. Let's just change texture 2 to something else, right? Let's just find a noise texture that really works for us for texture 2 that we think is kind of cool. It's a bunch of malarkey. No one cares about texture 2. Texture 2 is weird noise. Yeah, that's not bad. Multiple holes. I'm going to tell you why that's not bad here in a second. I think what we're making is kind of like an energy field, and one of the things that this material, this effect is lacking is kind of some individual movement from the texture. It just feels like swirling clouds to me, and not really like energy. The way you can kind of make something feel a little bit more energy is to add some distortion to it. So let's do that. Let's we still haven't messed with our power and opacity values, but let's you know what, let's do that first. So over here, we'll make the second value a 0.4, and which I find that interesting. And then let's mess with some of these power values. Let's do that. So we'll make both opacities a value of 1, 3 for the background one. And then if we up the power value on power 2, we're going to see less texture information, right? Because we're removing kind of the gray middling tones from the bottom, pushing our stuff towards white, and white is visible, right? If we did it on the front ones, we'd see less of the front texture and more of the back texture, right? So we can kind of individually decide how much of each texture we really want to see, and make something kind of interesting. Now, let's up the ante here, and let's use a third texture to distort both of these textures. The way we can do distortion is by just adding a texture to the UVs of both of these textures, adding some kind of noise to both of the UVs. So we can use a texture to get that noise, copy paste, and we'll just call this texture 3. And texture 3, we're just going to add, right click, hold A and right click to do an add. We're going to add the kind of noise texture to the UVs. Now they're immediately going to look super wacky, right? We're going to have this kind of weird swirly craziness. And this speed value, oh, I never actually, there you go. Now it is. So yeah, it's immediately going to look kind of crazy and weird. It's scrolling. And that's because adding noise to the UVs really really distorts them. So we have to kind of scale how much influence that noise has on the UVs by some kind of value. The way to do that is to hold M and left click, and that creates a multiply here. And oh, Plane Shift saying hey. Oh, hey! Oh, thank you for the raid. I really appreciate that. That's super awesome, Plane Shift. That's awesome. Thank you so much. For anyone who's just coming in and has never seen one of my streams, I'm Brian Benzen. I'm a real-time VFX artist, and I've been doing this for 10 plus years, and I've just worked for a lot of different kinds of companies. My most recent released game title was Mass Effect Legendary Edition. I was head of the material pipeline for the VFX team for Mass Effect Legendary Edition. And all we do on this stream is learn real-time VFX. It's my hope to educate more people to do this for free because I really love real-time VFX and I want more people to have this knowledge. So thanks for joining us. If you're interested in the stream after you've watched, please subscribe, support me. We have a Patreon, a Discord. All that stuff is available to you, and they're in some links on my channel if you're interested. So what we were doing was scaling how this noise texture messes with how this noise texture distorts the UVs of this texture. We wanted to be able to decide how much influence the distortion has. So we're going to create a parameter, and we're going to call this Distortion Strength. And we're going to make the Distortion Strength 0 to start, meaning don't distort it at all. Right? So now we're not going to see that weird kind of warbliness that we were seeing before. But we're going to add that distortion to both textures and both textures UVs, and then we're going to go play with that value in our instance, which is kind of cool. So we're just making spinny, whirly magic. You haven't missed very much. Just been kind of messing with some values. So as we increase the distortion value, you can see we're getting kind of some of that wiggly whirliness, which is kind of cool, right? When this distortion strength is a little goes a long way with this stuff, right? So we should be able to use a bunch of different textures because we parameterized all of these textures to be their own thing, so we can create a lot of really cool, interesting materials by just changing out some of these values now, which is interesting. It doesn't have to be blue, right? We've been staring at blue for a while. It could be red. It has like a kind of Eye of Sauron thing going on, right? Which is kind of nice. I think texture 2 is looking a little bit out of place. So let's use something that's got a little bit more granular noise to it. I'm kind of losing all of these. We want something that feels kind of smoky. Oh, yeah, we could have used that probably. I'm just searching through these files are all old noise textures that I haven't looked in this file in a while, but it's nice to have some options. That's kind of cool looking, huh? I'm going to turn the distortion strength down just a little bit, and we're going to make the background noise scroll a little less, and then we're just going to change some of these values. So that's feeling kind of nice. That's feeling kind of nice. Instead of seeing that one a bunch, we might 0.4. Yeah, so now we got kind of like two separate layers that are kind of swirling on top of each other, which I think is kind of nice, right? So that's kind of cool. One of the things that's kind of interesting is because we can't see the floor plane, which we turned black, and we can always change that color by going over here and creating a material instance, and then dropping this material onto the floor, and double clicking on the instance to open it up. And all we gotta do is, we can do this while we're looking at the map, come over here to color and change this value to something else, like a gray tone. Oh, actually. Oh, it never actually added the instance to the floor plane. We'll just drag and drop. There you go, right? So now that changed the value a little bit. And we can keep it kind of dark. But what I wanted to do, the reason I wanted to do this is because I wanted to show how different the effect looks when the background is a little different. This does feel to me like some swirling energy, which I think is kind of nice. I want to talk a little bit about this effect and how it intersects with the floor. You can see, right? It's got that kind of hard edge. It doesn't really feel like magic at the moment. One of the ways to solve that problem, if we were interested, is to go back to our material, and if we right click and we look for depth, so depth fade, this depth fade node is what we're looking for, and depth fade, just show it. So it's under depth fade, and essentially what this says is if I'm really close to some object, some piece in the world that is solid like I am, where we touch each other, I want to be able to change how hard that intersection is, or how hard that intersection is represented. And I'll show you what that means. If I multiply the result of my opacity by this depth fade value, and I plug that into opacity, and then I give myself two values here, left, hold one and left click to get a couple constants, and we can right click, convert to parameter, and we're going to call this opacity, or df for depth fade, opacity, and the other one is going to be fade distance, convert to parameter, so df distance, and so df distance is going to be how far away from where these two objects intersect should I start to sort of ramp back in the material, right? Be transparent where we hit each other, and then kind of fade back into our materials as we go. So I'm gonna set these values to be the default values, which it's 1 for opacity, fully visible, and then the distance by default is 100. So if I add these here, and I save, and I go back to the world, now you can see right where we used to have that hard, I just intersected with the floor feeling, there's this kind of softness, which is great. That's what you want. You don't want the illusion of the magic to be broken by seeing where we intersect the object with the world, right? We want it to all feel like it fits in the same space. One question you might have is, in the material instance, it's kind of this kind of reddish orange, but then you get back into the world and it's kind of this bright yellow. Well, the material instance kind of tries to hold a specific lighting scenario, whereas our world could be any lighting scenario. And in fact, I changed what the lighting scenario looks like by deleting the background, right? And by changing the floor plane to be a little bit more gray. It's creating some different circumstances, which is why this is brighter. If I wanted to hold or create a very specific color scenario for all of my effects to work in, I could add to this world a post-process volume. So if you go to placed actors, and if this isn't visible to you yet, you can come over here to Windows and look for placed actors, and you search in the search box for post-process volume. You can drag and drop into the world a post-process volume. Right now, I don't have any of the widgets visible, so if I press G, they'll come back. G is a way to hide widgets in this world. If the viewport's selected, I'm just tapping G right now. You can make them invisible or visible if you're just trying to get a good sense of what your world looks like without all the various widgets. So by default, a post-process volume only affects things that are inside post-process volume. So if I add our effects to this post-process volume and I go inside the post-process volume and I change some settings in the post-process volume, like say the bloom value, if I make this 5, 10, 50, right, this effect is really bright. but as I move out of the post-process volume, I can't see it. If I wanted this post-process volume to be, the effect of this post-process volume to be visible everywhere in the scene, I can come over here to the details panel and go down to the bottom where it says infinite extend unbound, and that means just do the effect of this post-processing volume. Yeah, hey, thanks IT. Yeah, thanks for coming, bud. Everywhere. So that helps kind of keep a consistent color across the entirety of your scene. So not to like blow everyone's eyes out with this color, I'm going to change this intensity back to 1, but there's some other cool stuff we can do, like exposure, which is the point of what I brought this in for. Right now, there's the tone between the brightest and the minimum and maximum brightness is really, really far from each other. So if I set these values to be closer to each other, now it looks a lot closer to what we were working with in the instance, right? It does change the overall brightness of this scene, and so you can make some decisions about what it is you want the scene to look like versus what you want your effects to look like within the scene, and find a compromise between the two, or you can make your post-process volume a certain size and throw all your effects in it. There are a bunch of different ways to handle that problem, but for right now, if we wanted to, I can make the intensity 2, and I can make the overall brightness of a 0.25, and now it's kind of a consistent, not crazy color, which I think is kind of nice, and it's got that soft edge. And I want to show, right, the geometry intersection happens below where that edge is soft, so we are getting the results we're looking for there. If we wanted to change that, right, that's why we parameterize this. If we wanted to change the distance where that fall off takes place, if I do 0, hard intersection, right, 100 gives me some kind of distance, 500, it's a lot more fall off going vertically, right? 1,000, now we're starting to see that fade happen, right? And we can change the opacity, right, to compensate if we wanted to, but you get that fall off, and that's what we were kind of looking for here. So I think the 100 was a good value to compromise. Why are we doing all of this? What is, how does this relate to visual effects? Well, this could be somebody's ability, right? They use a flaming sphere to push away the enemy or whatever, right? We could turn this into the anime effect that I started talking about when we started, in a number of different ways. I'm going to try to do it the easiest way possible, which is to use step or smooth step. Smooth step and step are ways to kind of get noise textures that have a lot of detail in them and kind of boil them down to their brightest and their darkest pretty simply. So I'm going to use smooth step, and the reason I'm going to use smooth step is because it gives a min and a max value. Step is just visible, not visible, hard-edged or not hard-edged, and we want some ability to change that in between. So I'm going to take the noise that I get from this texture, and instead of using our power and our opacity, I'm going to set a new parameter. I'm going to call it SS for smooth step. I'm going to call it TEX _01 _SS min max, min, and min is going to be 0, and max is going to be 1. Come in here and change this. Max 1. Plug this value into both our emissive color and into our opacity addition. So I set my max value to 0, and it should be 1, and that now it won't look any different. But you can see what it's going to do which is make the edges harder or softer. Which I wanted to do because I think that will give us that anime feel. Having the textures feel a little bit more solid and less detailed. We may bring back our power and our multiplies, but let's do this pretty quick so that we don't, so that we can get a good sense of what it's going to do, and then make some adjustments later. So instead of texture 1, we're going to call this texture 2. Smooth step, texture 2, smooth step. Yeah. Then we're going to save. And then let's go play with that. So we already have something I feel is a little bit less wonky and kind of feels a little bit more like swirling energy. It still doesn't feel anime to me, so let's mess with the material instance, right? That's why we made it. We gave ourselves the ability to mess around with these values until we felt comfortable about them. So over here in the map, I'm going to try to do kind of half screen as a material instance and half screen what we're seeing. And yeah, so what we're going to do is just drag that out so we can see these values a little better. And then let's change some of these max and min values. So if our max and our min are closer together, that means the values with which things are visibly shown are shrunken, meaning the edges are harder, right? We're getting less gray tones or tones that are outside of the range between the min and the max is really what I'm trying to say. So if I up the value for 1, you see we're going to see less texture, and that's because it's only showing values between 0.4 and 1. So if I go back to 0 for this, and I bring 1's max down, we're removing some of the higher tones, but we're actually making more visible the lower tones. We can do the same for texture 2. Texture 2's max can be 0.5. And if we want, we can say texture 2 is going to scroll 2 times as fast. It's actually hard to see that. It's hard to perceive that. So let's scroll it at a 0.2. Right. So now we got the bottom layer and the top layer. And I think if we wanted to, we could scroll our top value a little, our x value, the one that's actually moving us in a direction, 2 times as fast, 1.5 times. Yeah. So now we're getting some real kind of movement here. It feels like fire to me, like kind of a flaming circle. So let's make this into a particle system. We got about 20 minutes left. Let's actually make this into a particle system that actually kind of bursts out, grows, and then dissipates, right? Now that we got the kind of the soft edge fall off, and we really don't need this post-process volume to be like on top of it anymore, because it's affecting everything everywhere, which is great. Yeah, we got 2 layers here, and both layers are using kind of similar stuff, so let's make sure we don't want to use something else before we make our full decision here. Is there any other noise texture that feels like it might be better? Oh, I can actually really see that one underneath. That's kind of interesting, huh? Maybe I want, knowing that that's texture 2, maybe I want yeah, we can really see it. Wow. It's kind of interesting. I like how much of a second layer it actually feels like now. Though, you know, if I'm being really honest, I wish that our texture 2, our bottom layer, was a lot like our texture 1, but just scrolling at a separate speed. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy, paste. So now we have 2 layers. And that really actually feels thicker. It feels like more more noise actually kind of moving around, which is cool. So let's figure out how to erode this so that it kind of eats itself away, and then we'll throw it into a particle system that's actually useful, right? So erosion. How can we kind of eat this thing away? The chief easiest, kind of simplest way to do that is with subtraction. So if you take your opacity layer and we subtract and we set a value, hold S left click, and we call this erosion. We are eroding nothing right now, so nothing should happen. And we plug this into opacity, it'll look the exact same. I know it's going to happen, so I'm just going to advise us on this now. Every time I use a subtract, especially in terms of something that deals with like opacity, it gets weird when your subtracted value gets below a value of 0. It throws a bunch of stuff out of whack. So to keep our values between the 0 to 1 range, which is kind of the sweet spot for graphics programming, I'm going to use a clamp. Now this clamp will clamp our values between 0 and 1. And I will say there's a second option if we used a saturate. So saturate here is the same as clamp, except it doesn't give us the ability to change our min and our max, our top and our bottom value. Saturate is a default value of 0 and 1 clamped. So if I want, which I'm just gonna use saturate. Saturate is a clamp that is between 0 and 1 and does not give us the ability to change the min and max values. Clamp does give us the ability to change min and max values. So get rid of clamp because it's the same as saturate when you have your clamp values between 0 and 1. So this will help our subtract not go into some weird negative values and start to give us some crazy behavior. Now if I come over here and I save, and I go back to the map, and I open up our material instance, and I subtract, or I'm sorry, I use my erosion value we just set up to subtract some values from our noise, you'll start to see it look like it's getting eaten away, right? So we're seeing less and less. If we subtract 1, 2, 2 is fully gone. Now the reason why it took us all the way until 2 to get there, like 1.5, maybe it's still visible, right? Yeah. The reason it took us all the way to 2 to get there is because the value that was coming from the math before our subtraction was not between 0 and 1. So a way to fix that problem is to come over here before our subtraction and add a saturate here, right? So whatever the results of this math is, however these noise textures are added on top of each other, whatever the case is, keep that between 0 and 1, so that when I start my subtraction, when I get to a subtraction value of 1, meaning subtract everything that's visible, nothing will be visible. So save this, go back to the map, and so now it's not visible even when the erosion value is at that 1.5 it used to be. So 1, can't see anything. 0.9, 0.8, 0.7, 0.6, 0.5, right? So you start to see more and more, and then if you drag this value one way or the other, you see more or less, right? Oop. Sometimes the engine gets real shitty and doesn't want to like do the work to like render the frames between the drug slider. So one of the things I don't like about this erosion is that when it reaches a value of 0.9, it's still pretty visible, but then 0.95, 0.98, right? There's like a weird jump between 0.9 and 1 that I don't really like. So what I want to try to do is, instead of let's rearrange some of this math, right? So we're gonna throw this add into a saturate and then use our depth fade after, because we really don't care. We don't want our depth fade to worry about anything that happens before. We just want to say, when you touch that intersection between two objects, fade it a little. That's all depth fade is. It doesn't have to do anything with the rest of this math. So let's just make it the last thing that happens in the chain. Then, what I'd like to do is use, instead of a subtraction, use a smooth step, right? So, because that allows for some kind of smooth removal of noise. So I'm going to call this erosion. Erosion SS min. And this is going to be less crude than the subtraction. The easiest way is to subtract one from the other. We could subtract and then multiply. Anyway, as an effects artist, sometimes my brain is just like kind of all over the place about solutions to problems. So yeah, so instead of just base subtraction, we're going to use smooth step. And the setup here is that as I scale my max down, add, it's gonna subtract more from my min value, this setup, and so it'll feel a little more smooth. Did I want to saturate the addition for? Yes, I did. So saturate, throw into smooth step, then multiply by depth fade, and then let's save that and see what happens. All right, so fully visible, and then in our material instance, if I scale my smooth step max to be 7, 9, 10, 100. Yeah, right. So now the values are a little bit. So what I can do is I can change the bottom threshold, the min value, 0.1, 0.5, 0.7, 0.9, 1. So they're not on top of each other. Yeah. So if I change my min value, it's going to be a little bit more. Yeah, it's a little bit nicer to us about how it fades out. Because the values between the 0 and 1 with the smooth step operation are smoother. So yeah, so the way to turn this into a particle system would be to make the smooth step value that we're using use particle values. So if I right click and I look for particle color, just so we make sure we're throwing in some Niagara in there today. Instead of using erosion min, we're going to use particle opacity and plug that into our smooth step here. We're going to save that. And we haven't made a particle effect with this yet, but we're going to. So if we come over here to the content drawer, and in the content folder, if we right click, new folder, and we call this particles. Oops. If we go into particles and we right click and we go to effects, Niagara emitter, it's going to ask us if we want to use a template, and the answer to that's yes, that's fine. We'll use a fountain. And we're going to call this PS underscore fire swirl. And it's getting hot in here. We're going to right click PS Fire Swirl, and we're going to call it, we're going to create a Niagara System. So if I drag and drop this Niagara System into the world here, we're going to see a fountain of white dots. And that's kind of cool. It literally has nothing to do with what we're working on yet, but that's just the default behavior of the fountain. So I'm going to save all, because I can't remember the last time I saved. And I'm going to come over here to PS Fire Swirl. And instead of using a sprite renderer, we're going to use a model renderer. So if I delete that and I come over here to renderers, and I look for mesh renderer, now we can use a mesh here. And in the top it says meshes under renderer. So if we click the plus bar, plus number there, ooh, my voice went higher up, it'll start spitting out a bunch of these half spheres, the ones we made in Blender when we started this thing, which is kind of cool, huh? So they're not using our material, which we want them to. So let's come over here to, where's my brain? Override material. And if you check that on, you can set up a material to use on this mesh. And if we come over here to explicit material, we can add in Spinning Orb matte. And when this processes, we should see a bunch of fiery orbs getting spit out. Yep, there you go, right? Exactly. Now, that's also not what we want because there's way too many of them. We don't need sphere location. We don't need velocity. We don't need gravity, even though that's kind of cool. Well, let's just take a look at it while we have it. That's pretty awesome, huh? We don't need gravity. We don't need drag. Right now we're spawning 90 of these things. We don't need a spawn rate. We're gonna see nothing now. In emitter update, in emitter spawn, if we click the plus sign here and we look for burst, it's under emitter update. Burst, instantaneous, under emitter update. We want it to spawn one sphere for us and then have it die. And do that every time we spawn particles. So right now, if I save and compile this and we make sure our spinning orb is saved, I don't think we saved the material. And we save that. Oh, okay. Yeah. So the by default particle color is a value of 1. Our particle alpha is a value of 1. So we could add -1 to it, or subtract 1. So it's the same math. We can add -1 to this value, and that way the default material will not be invisible. Right? So now it's visible again. Come on. There we go. So now in the so now we see it in the world, right? It's the same thing. This is the particle version. This is just the regular version. The reason we would make it a particle system is because we want to act on those values, call them to play at some specific time that the particle system can actually gain access to, like particle opacity. So if we go back into particle opacity and we come over here to scale color, we are scaling the opacity of this already. I find that to be interesting, that this is doing nothing for us. Let's make this a value of 0, and that's a value of 0. Wait. Yeah. Oh, the math, y'all. We added a -1. So now this value, we need to up the value in the particle editor to compensate for the -1 we threw in there. So if the end value here was a 12, let's do this as a not a float, or not a curve. Let's just use the we'll use it where's float? Make right? Make float. just do this. Yeah, singular value, that's all I want. So if this value was 2, now it's not visible, right? So the value we want to use to scale this graph is 2 to 1. 1 to 2, right? So visible when it's 1, invisible when it's 2. So curve, float from curve. So at a time of 0, we want the value to be 1, and at the end of its lifetime, we want the value to be 2, and then over its life, it's going to kind of get eaten away, right? And if we wanted to kind of have that feel more particle-esque, this is kind of cool, right? It just fades out. If we want it to be a little bit more of like a hard-edged fade, we can act on this math a little bit, right? Instead of having the max value be a value of 1, we can make the max value something else, like where's the erosion max? There it is. It can be 0.5. Interesting. Yeah, so if we change whatever the representation is of the noise, how sort of soft it is on the edges before the erosion starts, we can get a different behavior when we start to fade things away later. But it seems real crunchy on the edges, and I kind of hate that. So let's do this a different way. Put this back at 1. And instead of just subtracting, we're going to multiply. Where's our time? I don't want to go long today. Let's fix this, and then we'll call it a day. So we are getting our erosion. It's just a little crunchy. Instead of using this addition here. Wait, what did I do? Oh, maybe that's why it looks weird. No, it's right. It's right. Sorry. Let's just separate the values. Let's not worry about min and max being the same. We'll save that, and we'll see what the shift is. Coming up on the final couple minutes here. Today was a wonky kind of start to the year string. Oh, it's popping out like crazy. Okay, that's definitely not what we liked. Try one more solution here. Right? Add this to this. Max. Min. Alf. That. Save. What I might do is just have the put powers before the. Yeah, it's closer. It still has a little bit of kind of weirdness to the edging, but I think that might be because noise 2 isn't scrolling or isn't spinning horizontally. So let's do that. Instead of having a 0 for this append, let's just take the speed, multiply it by a scalar, and then plug that into the speed. So for those who might have missed this before, all I'm doing is taking the speed value for noise 1 and dividing it by some amount and then plugging that in for speed 2. So they're going to move the same direction. They're just, one is going to be some scale or some fraction of the speed of speed 1. So now they're both going the same direction. That's a little less obvious to me. I do want some more distortion, so let's distortion strength. Let's crank this up to like 0.2, 0.5. Is that easier to see? Let's make the distortion texture move too, because I think that's going to make this look cooler, and then we'll call her a day here. Instead of we're going to divide the bottom by 2. and then multiply the top by 2, or multiply the distortion by 2. Let's divide this by 2. How about this? And then we'll leave that as a scalar we can change later. Oh, wait. We need a panner, or it won't move. So grab a panner. So now we have a panner for texture 1, texture 2, and then the distortion that distorts texture 1 and texture 2. And this panner is going to be some fraction of the speed. And we're gonna make the scale of texture 2 not equal the scale of texture 1. It's just going to be the same. And same with the noise. I'm trying to decide how I feel about having them all be the same. Okay, so let's scale the noise for texture 2 to be 2 times the size of the noise in texture 1, and then have the noise in texture 3 be whatever it's supposed to be. Whatever it was when you brought the texture in. And let's see what that feels like. Yeah, okay, all right. Now we're actually getting some like noise movement. It does feel though like this, because the speed from texture 2, or the speed in texture 2 is less. Is it less? Let's see. Speed scalar. Yeah. It feels like we're not getting as much kind of movement. So 0.5, 0.7, and let's see what that feels like. Yeah, now it's a little bit more kind of. I don't like that it kind of just comes in full size. So let's like do some particle stuff. Let's scale the mesh size over the lifetime. So we'll just look for scale. Ooh. I know I said I was gonna stop, but this is why I get so into it. Scale mesh size, and so I'm gonna use a curve to do this. I'm gonna do vector from float. That means this singular value is going to be used for the x, y, and z scale, and then I'm going to use curve, float from curve. And the reason we're not seeing anything is because Niagara is stupid and it doesn't understand that you want to scale the mesh unless you set the mesh scale here to be something uniform, ununiform, whatever it is. So I'm going to make it uniform 1 by 1 by 1, and then here in this mesh scale I'm gonna start it at a value of 0 and then ramp it up very quickly so that it feels kind of like a anime explosion. So there you go, right? So I think this is working out for us. If I right click, go to auto to change the scale type, I can then kind of ramp this thing up pretty quickly. I do think it kind of maybe lives for too long. I don't really like it being random, so let's just make it live for 1 second. Ooh. Ooh. It's not very bright either, now that I kind of get a good sense of it. So what I want to do is give myself, or actually I can do it here. I can come over here to emissive color. So for those who aren't really knowledgeable about how colors work in game engines, anytime you push a game engine that has Pbr value or Pbr material setup values above a value of 1, those values, those colors start to bloom, go closer to white, but also be super bright and have the appearance of emitting their own light. So if I wanted that to happen here, I just have to change this V value from a value of 1 to say 50. Now it's super bright, right? If I save that and I go back to the engine, right, so turn off, and this is distracting, so we'll kill this one. So that's the effect, right? And we'll hide all the extra layers. There's something weird going on with the smooth stepping, and so I'm gonna reset them. know that doesn't make this feel as full. But you see, now we're getting kind of smooth erosion, which is great. So instead of using smooth steps, I'm gonna use powers. I don't know if the smooth steps are what's kind of causing us issues, but I'm gonna go back to power nodes. It's supposed to be smoother, but I'm not really sure why we're getting that weird, that weird behavior. Let's clean up some of the graph here. We're gonna add and saturate. That's still gonna be the case. Oh, I realize now that we're only getting color from a singular noise node. That's kind of interesting. So let's add both colors there, and then instead of using smooth steps, we're just gonna set power values, and we're just gonna say hold S and left click text 01 pow, and we'll set this to a default value of 1, and we're going to do the same for the bottom. So we're just going to copy this stuff, copy, paste, text 2 pow, and then drop this noise into this power, and then plug this into the add, plug this into the add, and now that add is going into our emissive color and into our opacity, which is then being scaled by our particle color. And then let's save and see what happens. And if this looks good, we'll come back and do a final cleanup of the material, and then we'll say our goodbyes for today. Yeah, there you go. That's pretty cool. I actually like that. There's a bunch of other cool stuff I might do to make this look nice. I might actually let's change the timing of this stuff. So if we're gonna mesh scale, let's just add a keyframe and have this kind of ramp up a little quicker. So, oh, that's a little too quick. Yeah, there you go. I also like to make sound effects with my mouth when I'm working on stuff, because that's just how artists do. So this scale color is kind of uniform, and I want it to be kind of slower. I want the end of the lifetime to be to kind of happen a little quicker, right? So the erosion kind of holds itself off for most of the life, and then boom, right at the end, it kind of eats itself away. Boom. I kind of want this to be rounder, and this to be rounder. You gotta play with the tangents now. Oh, what's cool about Niagara is that you can scale these graphs to be larger. Yeah, that's better. There's a little hitching in it that I kind of don't like, but I do appreciate how it's scaling up a little bit faster. I'm gonna change this tangent slightly, and then we're gonna call it a day. Yeah, that's pretty good actually. Bang. Oh wait, so here's the funny thing about Niagara that I think is kind of sucky. Sometimes it doesn't register that you've made changes to graphs and stuff. If you like change just a graph and you hit save and compile, it does nothing. So if you do something to a value input, so like say scale curve, you add like a 0.01 to it and then save and compile, you'll see it actually does make your change in the editor. It's weird. I don't know why that happens, but that's how it works for some reason. I hope people enjoyed this. I actually really, I think this effect looks really cool. There's a lot of potential in where it could go now that we have it going here. Let me actually focus in on it so that it's not just like a random. Yeah, right. So that's pretty cool. I think there's a lot of potential here. Just like a kind of a fiery explosion from an ability, it's really nice looking to me. One thing it kind of lacks is maybe some varying tones, so I might use a color curve to do that, but you're going to have to catch that on another stream, or, which leads me to kind of how I close these streams normally. I teach a class twice a year in real-time visual effects, and right now I'm registering folks for my February course. You have about another 3 weeks to get in to the course. It's a live course where I instruct in a virtual classroom on Discord, and we go through a series of projects that I give to you. They're yours to look through and work through, and then utilize as you wish. We teach for 8 weeks. It's twice a week for 2 hours, and those lectures are recorded, so you have those lectures to watch later if you'd like. And you get to be in a classroom with people from all over the industry. If you're a person who's looking to get into video games or just wants to meet more people in the industry, it's the perfect class for you. Beginners are welcome. No prior experience is necessary. I'll explain everything from the ground up. And so if you're interested, you can register on the website, which is https:// let's make effects.com/level up live. So that's the website for the class. I'd urge you to join it if you're interested in real-time VFX. It's a great place to learn it. I'm accessible 24/7 to ask questions to, do portfolio work for that entire 8 weeks. You can just hit me up at any given time and ask me questions about things you're working on at work. I'm at your disposal for essentially 8 weeks. And class starts February 1st. If you're not a part of our Discord, jump on our Discord. Our Discord is great. It's full of people like yourself who are maybe interested in real-time VFX and just want to learn more about the craft. It's free, and there's just a bunch of free knowledge given there constantly. My hope is to gather a bunch of VFX artists. That's the point of Let's Make Effects. Teach people knowledge that they really want to learn, and allow them to get into the workforce with the rest of us. I love this work. I want to see more of you there from all walks of life. I'm an ally, and I just want to continue doing this work for people who are interested. So thank you for coming to the stream. If you liked it, you can watch this video again on YouTube, subscribe to this channel, donate bits. I'm here every Saturday, and I just hope to see you guys again, okay? Have a good Saturday.